Thank you for being here. We're from the Environmental Justice League of Rhode Island. And so we don't work just with the environment, we work with environment and social justice, right? Because we understand that most of the burdens, all the hazardous waste sites, all the toxic sites, they're placed where? In low-income communities, communities of color, indigenous communities, from what we term frontline communities. So it's important to understand that we are all impacted by environmental crisis and the climate crisis, but we're all impacted differently. And so the environmental justice movement came out in response of environmental racism. Because all these toxic sites are not, we look at Rhode Island and we look at Providence, they're not located in the east side. They're not located, if we go outside of Providence, they're not located in Barrington. They're not located in Newport. So this is the reason why the Environmental Justice League develops leadership in these frontline communities, works to develop leadership in these frontline communities so that they can make the decisions for themselves, advocate for themselves, be at the table when the decisions are being made. Otherwise, the decisions are being made outside of these communities, which these are great ideas, but they're made outside of the frontline communities, and the impact that is going to be, these communities are going to be impacted with these decisions, and they're going to receive the biggest burden. So, in this sense, I'm not going to talk about all the areas that we work in. We work in food, we work in health, we work in environment and climate justice. But I'm just going to focus today about how we go about doing our work and how we encourage others in the state going about the work. And basically, I want to talk about just transition today because we understand that in order to work with this climate crisis and environmental crisis and environmental racism, we need to move from an extractive economy, fossil fuel-based extractive economy, to a regenerative economy. And the way to do that is through a just transition. We can't have people working in the fossil fuel economy and all of a sudden moving on to all these renewables and regenerative industries, and how are they going to put food on their table for their families? They've made a career out of the fossil fuel industry. So there is a lot of components that we have to think about on how to transition into a new economy, making sure that it is just and equitable. We have worked for the last 2 years with the City of Providence, the municipality specifically, developing a racial and environmental justice committee who is working to change or do a systems change in the municipality based on these just transition principles. Last year, the mayor of Providence adopted these principles specifically for the City of Providence. The Racial and Environmental Justice Committee was comprised of 10 frontline community members and 5 City of Providence employees and staff workers. And with those 15 people, there was a development of these just transition principles adapted to the City of Providence. I have to say that the 10 community members in this Racial Environmental Justice Committee do not have the decision-making power. They represent 10 other community members, frontline community members, people of color, low income, indigenous communities, immigrant communities, and it is that body of people that face that really informed the representatives sitting at the Regional Environmental Justice Committee, and that's how the decisions are being made. Always checking in with the communities on the ground who are the greatest impacted and carry the greatest burden. So this model of moving forward in making policy change and making the municipality more transparent, more accountable, having decision-making, having the voices of frontline communities at the decision-making table has been a very important step, but we need to continue forward also to make this a statewide initiative. At the moment, we're also working in the Port of Providence. We saw how the asthma hotspot, that Rhode Island has great asthma hotspots. The Port of Providence is almost the highest asthma hotspot in the state. And who lives there? It's Black communities, Latino communities, and very low income communities. So we are working in that Port of Providence and also at a regional level. At a regional level, we're developing regional hubs to move from this extractive fossil-based economy to a regenerative economy. I want to go a little bit into the just transition principles to give sort of like an overview to us so that people understand what we're talking about. So I'm going to ask a few questions. For an economy, this current economy to work, what is it that a company would need in order to operate? Any thoughts?
Laborers.
We need workers.
Workers?
Workers.
And what else? Because you have workers, but if you have workers and nothing else, does
Resources.
resources. So you need resources and workers. Great, perfect. So let's start with resources. Where do we get the resources currently in this economy?
Outside the state.
Okay, outside of the state, but how do we get those resources?
Extract them.
We extract.
Dig them out.
We
Dig them out of the ground.
take them out of the ground. We dig them out of the ground. We extract them. And once we use them, what do we do with those? We throw them back. we trash. So how is the earth treated in terms of resources? It's extractive, we dig it, we exploit it, and then we trash it and dump it. That's how we're working with our resources. How are we working with our workers and our labor?
Same thing.
Same thing. Explain a little bit more. What does that mean?
Sure, at the end of 30, 40 years, kick them out.
Yes. Do they have decision-making power? No.
Not within the work environment.
No.
Very little.
So laborers are just that. They're a piece of the machine. They do not have decision-making power. They're not, if they have dreams or they have great skills and great ability to grow, that is quite limited, especially in frontline communities. So it's definitely not a cooperative environment. It's more of an exploitation of the labor force. Just like we exploit the resources of the earth, we exploit the labor as well. And the end purpose, why are we doing this? Why does a company, what's the end result, or what's the end goal of a company when? Profit. It's profitability. And that profit is going to all the laborers equally? No. So it's enclosing the wealth and the profit in just a few. And so enclosing wealth and power in just a few. And that's the model of the economy that we have right now. So for us, if we do not address that model, we can change different pieces. We can do a little bit of renewable here. We can do a little bit of intervention here and there. But the model still remains in place, and we're really not attacking the root of it all. So, oh, that went fast. So I want to I don't know if it's large enough, but I don't have a pointer, but there's two systems, the extractive economy and the regenerative economy. So we just went through the resources. Thank you. This has a pointer, just by, oh. So great, so we just looked at the resources. Perfect. We looked at labor. We looked at the end capital gains profit, enclosing wealth and power in a select few. This all can happen with a specific worldview and cultural view. And that is of consumerism, consume, 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 and a colonial mindset, where we come in, we tell you where we're going to put our company and put our toxic sites, and you're going to work for us. And the way to enforce this system, the governance is militarism. We're talking about moving to a regenerative economy, where we're talking about resources in a different light. We're talking about taking care of the earth. We're talking about regeneration. In terms of work, we're talking about cooperation, with everybody being able to be at the table and have decision-making power, grow in their work and in their skills, and the end result and the purpose of it all to have ecological and social well-being, not just profit for a few. This requires a worldview, a change in culture and worldview. It does require that. It requires to look at the earth and the relationships, all the interconnectivities and all the interconnections. It's about caring and about the sacredness of life, the sacredness of water, the sacredness of the land, the sacredness of air. And if that worldview is not in place, it's going to be very difficult to transition to a new economy. And the way that the way that this would be enforced, or we can make sure that this happens, is with a deep democracy, with everybody being able to be at the table, have a say, and have meaningful participation. There's much more to just transition. There are whole workshops and trainings that we give. We don't have the time to do that now, but for any political candidate or even a not political candidate, we do encourage you to please look at this holistically, because just changing the resources on that end and just making renewable, which we want solar, we want wind, but just changing that does not really move us away from the entire extractive economy and from environmental racism. Thank you.